Today, we welcome local author Martha Williams. Thank you for joining us for our Meet the Author program offered by the Virginia Beach Public Library. Let me begin by asking you to tell us about your background and how you got started with writing.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation on your Meet the Author program. I'll just give you a few highlights about my background as it relates to my personal background as well as my professional background. Personally, I am from Virginia. I grew up on a family farm. My grandparents and my parents are farmers, and so that was their livelihood. And I guess I got started reading very young. On the farm, of course, there are always many chores, and especially in the summer. And I think I love to put books in my room. And when I could get away from the family, I would go retreat to my room and I would read. And so I always loved reading. I would check books out of the library once I was in high school. In elementary school, we really didn't have a library, but we've always had lots of books in the home. In terms of writing, I have always loved to write. And I guess very early I had sort of a motivation to write. I had several relatives, my uncles were in the military, and they were stationed overseas. And they said, Martha, if you write me while I'm away, I will bring you something nice back.
Mhm.
And of course, I did. And I received a kimono doll from one and a Mickey Mouse watch from the other. But so writing has always been something that I've loved to do. And I like pens and pencils and writing instruments. So my father used to have a Esterbrook pen with the Schaefer ink with the inkwell in it. So writing has always just been sort of fascinating to me. But my professional background has been in higher education. I was in the corporate extension service, and so being a professor and an administrator is what I've done most of my career. So writing has always been a part of whatever I have been involved in.
All right. Tell us about your latest book.
My latest book, the title of it is First Gardeners, and it is a book for children. In 2016, I published the WPA Original Gardeners, and then in 2023, January of this year, First Gardeners came off the press. It it took me to actually write that book. I guess I was involved in it on a somewhat regular basis for about 15 months with the First Gardeners. And the First Gardeners, it's a nonfiction book, and the setting is the Norfolk Botanical Garden, which I'm sure most people in this area are familiar with. However, they're not many people are familiar with the history of Norfolk Botanical Garden. During the Great Depression, 1938 to be specific, is when the garden was started, and it was a swamp, and the city of Norfolk hired 200 African American women and 20 men to dig the swamp and to carve out this beautiful flower garden. And there were a group of students who came to the botanical garden involved in a project, a community service project, and they began to look at the history, and that's when we discovered. So my book tells about their struggles, their friendships, their hardships, why they wanted to be involved in this WPA, which stands for Work Progress Administration. It was a program started by President Roosevelt to put people back to work during the Great Depression. And these people were hired to develop this beautiful flower garden in Norfolk. So I tell other people in that effort.
Is writing your primary career?
Writing is not my primary career. My primary career it has been education, however, but not specific to writing. I, as I mentioned, I've always been involved in writing, but the writing that I had done prior to the two books that I've written was writing reports, writing grants, writing journal articles. It was more technical academic writing, but
Sure.
writing a story, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it's a whole new game. So I had to do quite a bit of work, but I would like to say that there are lots of supports in this particular area. What I did to prepare for that, since writing was not my career, nor did I major in English or journalism, I I attended several workshops. The Muse Writing Center has many resources that can be used. They have writing camps, they have writing workshops, they have classes online, classes in person. And so I've attended the workshop, the conferences, and met many authors. So I prepared for writing. I also took a class at the community college, and it was in creative writing. So, but I think if you're not a professional writer, writing has two major challenges. One is time, trying to carve out enough time during the work week and doing your personal family responsibilities, and also expertise. So I would say that I had a story to tell, a story that I wanted to tell,
Mhm.
and I had to prepare myself to get ready to do the writing.
All right. And we have worked here at the library with that with the Muse Center that you're talking about. I'm very familiar, and I think that was an excellent way for you to get some experience with writing or some practice perhaps with it. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Are you
Yeah.
self-published or do you have a publisher?
I'm both. Um, my first book was it was self-published, and the reason I self-published is because as I began to research the history of the WPA project at the Norfolk Botanical Garden, I couldn't find any information about the Gardens WPA program. I went to UVA, and that's where the Virginia resources are at the
Mhm.
University of Virginia. They have an archives there, and they had no record of the WPA project at the Botanical Garden. And I went to the libraries, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, and I really could not find any information. And so finally, the little information that I had from people and what the family members had stated, my daughter said, "Well, why don't you write your own book?" And she had just written a book on nutrition,
Mhm.
and it was about 125-page paperback book. And she introduced me to Create Space. And that's what I used to publish my first book. Create Space is no longer available, but the platform has been changed to KDP Amazon. And so now Amazon is actually hosting that particular site. So I found that to be very user friendly. However, I did use someone from Fiverr. Some people may be familiar with that. They have experts there who do, I guess, what you call gig work. They will format the book for you, illustrate it for you, develop your cover. So I did get someone to format the book for me. So I typed it up in Microsoft Word, sent it to them, and then they formatted it based on the Create Space platform.
All right.
For my first Gardeners, my last book, I did use a publishing company, and I used Friesen Press, and that's a publishing company out of um, uh, Canada, and they will format it for you. They will direct you through publishing the book. And when I first talked with them, they told me it would take about 10 or 11 months. And I thought, well, I have my manuscript. I don't know why it's going to take that long. But actually, it did take, it was almost a year before we finally the book out of, um, came out on publication. So it does take a while, because what they do is they will make sure everything is the way you want it. They will offer you an editor, And I use a local editor initially, but then when I presented my manuscript to them, I also asked to use one of their editors, but it was very little work that she had to do with that. In terms of which one I would prefer, self-publishing or publishing with a publisher, I would really say both are good options, but it depends upon what your timeline is and also how much money you want to spend. And of course, the self-publishing I found to be much more economical, but with the publishing company, once the book is published, then they work with Ingram, and they distribute your book worldwide, really. So I like that option as well. So I found that to be helpful. But I think both are good options. It just depends upon what timeline and the resources that you have to spend.
Sure.
Mhm.
And how do you promote your work?
I promote my work several different ways. The Initially, my work was promoted on social media, and I still have Facebook. I have Instagram, and I guess we now have X. And I,
Yes.
yes, and so I use those. I have LinkedIn, so social media is very good. I have because of the topic that I have, which is a garden book, basically. I have been invited to quite a number of garden clubs because of the history of Norfolk Botanical Garden, which most people did not know, and
Mhm.
many still don't know. The garden clubs were very interested in the topic. So I would take my books, and a speaking engagement was set, and I sold quite a few books that way. And I, during Black History Month and during Women's History Month, I am fairly booked during those 2 months, because, of course, it's a topic where the gardeners were 220 African Americans. And, of course, Women History Month, we're looking at women and their contribution to the botanical garden, to the state. And since it was the Work Progress Administration, it is a national program. And so I have, and I also have attended different kinds of fairs. For an example, there's a fair Black authors like to read, and I've attended that. And there have been library readings, and I've also presented at the Hampton History Museum. So
Yes.
there are many different formats, many different settings that I've used to promote my book. And of course, I have business cards and flyers that I use.
Yes. I'm getting a little bit ahead here, but do the botanical gardens themselves, do they sell your books there at the gardens?
Absolutely. The Botanical Garden has been enthusiastically promoting my book, and
Good.
it's you can buy it either on their website or in the store. So,
Great.
and the Botanical Garden was very excited when both books were published, but especially the children's book, The First Gardeners. So that
Good.
is in the bookstore.
All
Yes,
right. I'm glad to know that.
yes.
Tell us, where do you get ideas for your books?
I think for me, of course, my book is a historical account of the garden's origin. So I think the history is certainly a good example, and I think ideas from books come from passion, interest that you might have. If you're really interested in something, and I was interested in this story because it had not been told and it was local history. So I
Mhm.
thought that that would certainly be something that the community would be interested in, since there's so many people who attend Norfolk Botanical Garden. So I think ideas come from personal stories, maybe family stories that you have, or perhaps there's something that you really want people to know and you have a perspective that you think is great. And I think just daily living, uh, ideas for books. And what you can also do is you may have an idea, you may not have the full narrative in mind. And of course, we never know when you begin to write a book, you don't know where it's going to go, what kind of
Mhm.
crooks and turns and directions it might take. So I think talking with people, if you have an area that you're interested in, it's always good to get different perspectives because you want to appeal to a wide audience. And that's very important. Deciding what you want your audience to look like. Are you appealing to young children? I think with a children's book, you are appealing to the children as well as parents and grandparents, because of course they are going to be the ones that buy the book. So
Yes.
the cover has to be something that's somewhat interesting and that children, and also I think the graphics in the book are also very important. And I did use an illustrator with Friesen Press. So they gave me a choice of several different illustrators, and I selected one that I thought best represent my topic. So
Yes, good.
yes, so that's what I use. I and I also, with my first book, I took a picture in the garden of the azaleas, because Norfolk Botanical Garden was the Norfolk Azalea Garden, and I had a picture that I thought was just the right picture for the book, and I used that. But with the first gardeners, I did have the illustrator develop the cover. I gave her an idea of what I wanted on the cover. I wanted
Yes.
a male, female gardener. I wanted flowers. I wanted bright flowers, different color flowers. So I think if you have an idea in mind, even though you may not be a visual artist, then you can describe what you want in detail.
Sure. Describe your writing process, if you would.
My writing process is one that I would say is, I believe that you have to work on the narrative on a consistent basis. I'm one that I like silence when I write. I don't want music, no TV. I don't want people talking. I like to have quiet time so that I can just write. I do type. I love writing, and as I mentioned earlier, I love writing with fountain pen, a nice pencil.
Mhm.
But when it comes to my manuscripts, both of them, I did use I used Microsoft Word to type my manuscript, and I think with me, what I had to learn in writing my book is to just write and not edit. It is
Okay.
important not to correct as you go along, because if you have thoughts and you have an idea of how you want your book to flow, then you need to write and then go back later and you can edit that book. So I would say my writing process is really involved consistency, and certainly being consistent in setting a time for writing. At one time, I was writing in the morning, and then my schedule changed, so I was writing at night. But it needs to be consistent. I think in terms of writing, it's good to have a special place to write, maybe a special pen, or just a setting. Maybe you have a cup of water, cup of tea, whatever, while you're working. But develop some kind of ritual, and that's what I did, and made it uh, something that I would look forward to, and I could put myself in the frame of mind to work, because many times you can put it off and say, well, I'll do it later, I'll do it tomorrow.
Sure.
But I think it's important to write, whether it's 3 days a week or one day a week, depending upon your schedule. But so my writing process was quiet, uh, using a electronic device,
Mhm.
and um, avoiding edits until I wrote a certain amount of text, and then go back and edit. And I also, once I completed my thoughts and the length of the book, then I did send it to a local editor to read. And And I think you have to just brace yourself and be open to critiques when you're writing. Someone once said to me, "Don't don't let everybody read it. They might criticize it." And well, that's what you want. So you just have to be ready for that, and you
Yes.
don't have to accept it, but at least you get some idea of how other people are responding to what you're writing.
Yes. All right. We had talked earlier about the fact that your books are available for purchase at the Norfolk Botanical Gardens. Where else could they be purchased?
My books are also available at Hampton History Museum. Has a copy of my book. My books are available on Amazon, and my books are available at Barnes and Noble. First Gardeners, the WPA Original Gardeners is not available at Barnes and Nobles, but First Gardeners is available at Barnes and Nobles. It's also available, of course, from Friesen. That's Friesen, Friesen Press. They're available from there. And I was really excited. Friesen Press also included my book in their summer catalog. So my book
Ah,
is in there. And so my book is available not for purchase, of course, but it is available in all the local libraries. I have a copy of my book in Chesapeake and Norfolk and Virginia Beach. So my books are available in the library. Also in the Southampton County, I think in Franklin, Virginia, my book is available. But and of course, it's available from the author. It can be martha.williams62@gmail.com. So I can send it out, and I do mail books out. But it is readily available from, of course, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. And
okay.
mhm.
What is some advice that you would give to an aspiring writer?
uh, I think number one is for an inspiring writer is to begin. Sometimes we put it off and we think we'll do it next year or next week, or I don't have time. But I do think you always have time to get started if it's just an outline. So it is important to outline what you think you want to write, and you can fill it in as you keep a notebook handy with you. If you have an idea, jot it down, because it may not come back the way you are thinking about it. You may forget something really that you think is very important. I would say look for books like similar to the one that you want to write. What I did was I went to the children's library in in my city, and I looked at some children's books. I tried to find children's books on gardening. I didn't find very many, so that was very, very good. I spoke with the librarian there. So I would say number one, if there's a topic you want to write about or a short story, then look at some of the materials that have already been written. And the librarians are very helpful. I also checked out books on writing. I checked out a book on children's writing, a children's book. So I would say that to save yourself a lot of frustration, headache, doubt, then check out some resources in the library. Is wonderful. The librarian staff knows what's available and can point you in the right direction. So I would say seek out, also use references. You don't have to create everything yourself. You can get ideas, suggestions, and also you can talk with people about what you're writing. Just kind of bounce it off, see if that's something they're thinking about. They might give you another perspective that you hadn't thought about. But number one is get started. Keep a journal. Another book that I read, and then I actually met the author, is Julia Cameron's book, which is called The Artist's Way. And it's on creativity. And she came to Virginia Beach to the Edgar Casey Center. But what she asked writers to do is to write 3 pages every day, and just trend of thought. And what it does is it sort of gets your creative juices. It frees your mind from a lot of different things. You just write it out, and then you get in the habit of writing. So she said, write 3 pages per day, nothing in particular, but just whatever comes to mind, just write it. And it's just for your eyes only. And she also suggests having an art day where you go to maybe a department store, or maybe just go out in the park, but go out and look at things and think about how you might use those, how just imagine a description of those things that you see, but begin to create some sense of creativity, originality in your mind, to develop confidence and just kind of get your creative juices flowing. So I think, but it is important to, I would say resources are important. Look at what other people have written, just in terms of style. And if you love to read, then you will also love to write.
All right. Good advice, Martha. Good advice. At this point, will you read us an excerpt from one of your books?
Oh, sure. I will read you an excerpt from one of my books. I'm actually going to read just a little, a bit about what the gardeners went through, the WPA Original Gardeners. And that's the title of my first book. And then my children's book is First Gardeners. So we're really looking at the gardeners and what they experienced during the Great Depression in the city of Norfolk, working through the Work Progress Administration project. And this is an excerpt. In my book, I have 15 kind of biographical sketches. And this is one from Mrs. Sally Tucker Austin. And her son, Matthew, told our group, he said, in the winter, we had to wrap my mother's feet and legs in rags in the morning for the job in the swamp to keep some of the cold air from her body while she worked. At the end of the workday, which was at dusk, he would have to sit her in front of the heater and peel the clothes from her legs so that she could unthaw. As she warmed, she told them about her day. Stories were told of how the handlebars of the iron wheelbarrows were wrapped with rags to prevent freezing hands from frostbite. Sometimes she said it would get so cold that they would build a fire in a barrel in the swamp. Her stories were stories that she told of friendships formed and how the men and the women teamed together to get the job done. She described how the women supported each other doing this work, and they even joked. They called the WPA the Poor Women's Association. She was a teacher and she was adept at storytelling, and so was her son. Brun Austin, which was her son, said that working in the garden was hard work, but it kept our family from going hungry. It was during the Depression, and work was really scarce. Things were hard, particularly for Afro American women. They didn't care if you were a man or a woman, they cared if you could get the job done. It was better than nothing. The WPA was just something to get you by until things got better. The women, for the most part, realized it wasn't the greatest job, but it provided them a way to put bread on the table, which otherwise would have been impossible. So that's a little bit about the the description of what the women had to undergo in the winter when they were working in the garden. And
Yes.
in my children's book, we do have a picture of the women with their coats on and standing in front of a fire barrel, staying warm, keeping their hands warm. So and so so what I attempted to do is to describe to the children how the women work together, how they form friendships. It was hard work, but working together, they got it done, and they worked from January until December. winter, spring, fall, and summer they worked. So
All right, Martha, that's the end of the questions that I have for you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add beyond what you've already told us?
I think that I would just like to announce that it would be interesting if people would like to know more and to see me at the Heritage Day. Norfolk Botanical Garden has a Heritage Day each year to celebrate the first gardeners, and that is going to be held this year. Usually it's held in the spring when the azaleas are blooming, but this year it's going to be held in September, and the date is September 17th, and that's from 2 to 3 p.m. Admission is free to the garden that day, and I will be there, and several other authors will be there who have written books about gardeners. So, and also, it's an opportunity to meet some of the families. But I would highly recommend to aspiring writers to really get started, and you can do it. And always have someone who can keep you encouraged and who won't let you quit on yourself. So even if you're writing something that you don't think is very good, it will get better. The more you write, the more interesting, the more motivating it will become. So that's what I would like to give that advice to just keep writing.
Thank you, Martha. I have to say, you have found such an interesting topic here. I think it is something wonderful to know about our local history. So I thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I wish you the best of luck with your books.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
You are so
Thank
welcome.
you. Mhm.